Record.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Bloomington Rotary Club's weekly celebration of service for November 16th, 2020. I'm your current president, Ashley Wesley. Thank you for being here. Michael, please show our flag graphic for 15 seconds of respectful silence. We ask that you remain on mute and take this time to personally reflect. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Connie Shikalis, who will be offering our reflection today.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to prepare the reflection today. I love November and transitions. Now we step onto the front porch and we can see the trees' boughs, birds and squirrels' nests, and neighbors' homes acres away, which we had forgotten were even there. Here are two poems about nature's transitions. The first is by Robert Browning. American composer Amy Beach wrote a wonderful song using these lyrics. That's for my next reflection. The second and much inferior poem is, of course, by me. I will end with a few measures of Mozart's Horn Quintet in E-flat. By Robert Browning, Ah, Love, But a Day. Ah, love, but a day, and the world has changed. The sun's away, and the bird estranged. The wind has dropped, and the sky's deranged. Summer has stopped. Look in my eyes, wilt thou change too? Should I fear surprise? Shall I find aught new in the old and dear, in the good and true? With the changing year, ah, love, but a day, and the world has changed. The second one is No November by me. No November, pretty thief, you came last night and slashed each leaf, leaving limbs like bones licked dry by hungry dogs afraid to die. You, our year's end's bitter tramp, who robins' warblings would revamp into a whipping whine of wind, which takes till April to rescind. But one thing sure my garden knows, you could not claim her last white rose.
Thank you so much, Connie. That was absolutely delightful.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce a few guests we have with us today. Starting with L.A. Williams, thank you for joining us again. And Connie, you have a guest. Would you like to introduce your guest?
I'm sorry, I'm unmuting. My guest is the wonderful Stephanie von Hirschberg.
Welcome, Stephanie. And Jim Bright, would you like to introduce your guest?
You bet, President Ashley. It's my pleasure to introduce David Willett. David is a longtime member of the Rotary Club of Plymouth, Michigan, not to be confused with Plymouth, Indiana. And it's a club about the same size as ours, about 100 members. So welcome, David.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Did Bill Brown join us? I know that we had a mysterious iPad. Okay. So thank you for everyone for joining us today. And our producers are Michael Shermis, Sally Gaskell, and not Natalie Blaze today, but typically Natalie helps us out with our attendance. So thank you, Sally, for filling in. Our roundabout reporter for this week is Owen Johnson. Birthdays, Bryce Bowe on November 21st. Membership anniversaries, Jim Cryway, 32 years, Joe Darling, 2 years, and Chris Kroll, 2 years. Thank you for being a part of the family. We have quite a few Rotarians in the news, and we always could have many, many more, but I picked the highlights. Leadership Bloomington Monroe County Alumni Association named Jeff Baldwin its 2020 Distinguished Alumni. Jeff is the executive director of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Bloomington. Congrats, Jeff. And it appears that Jeff is in good company with fellow Rotarians, as 5 others have received the honor. Kyla Cox-Deckard, Ann Wren, Michael Shermis, Glenda Morrison-Murray, and Bob Salzberg have all received the award in the past. So congratulations to you all. And we know we're in distinguished company, but this just proves it again. Owen Johnson was interviewed in a TV spot entitled The History of Indiana Journalist Ernie Pyle, which aired on Veterans Day on WTWO Terre Haute. Congrats, Owen. He's always in the news. Rotarian Winston Schindel was presented with an IU Bicentennial Medal by fellow Rotarian and Indiana Memorial Union Director Hank Walter on November 12th. Winston served as director of the IMU from '81 until he retired in 2004. In 1995, he also took on responsibility for the IU Auditorium. Throughout his career, Winston received many awards and recognition for his service to students and the university. In addition to his commitment to Rotary, past president and board member, Winston has served on the Monroe County Convention and Visitors Bureau, Volunteers in Medicine, the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, United Way of Monroe County, and on the boards for the Bloomington Hospital Foundation, the Bloomington Health Foundation, Shalom Community Center, and Stone Belt. In 1994, the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce recognized his community service by naming him the recipient of its Lifetime Achievement Award. The IU Bicentennial Medal honors distinguished and distinctive service in support of IU's mission as a public university. Congratulations, Winston. And he's also in excellent company. Rotarian Phil Eskew's wife, Ann Eskew, recently received the medal, along with Rotarians Judy Schroeder, Michael Wade, Jim Capshew, and Charlotte Zitlow. So we have quite the distinguished group, and that's just 2020, folks. I didn't go through all the rest of the year. So if you received the IU Bicentennial Medal, congratulations, and thank you for being a Rotarian. Now for a toast announcement from Sarah Laughlin.
Hi, everybody. This is just a really quick thank you for an extraordinary toast. And I want to start with Jim Bright and Melissa Stone, who worked on social media, worked the social media, print media, the airwaves, the email, US mail, the phone, and that resulted in more than 400 people, a record, joining us for the toast. Including athletics luminaries and top leadership from IU over the last 40 years, business leaders and thought leaders in our community, Rotarians from across the district, and writers and media stars from across the country. One of the advantages of being virtual. Mike Baker and Phil Eskew from our club, with help from Mark Dayton, headed up sponsorships and ticket sales, and despite cutting the sponsorship levels in half in recognition of the pandemic, managed to bring in the second highest ever revenue. Ashley Sullivan and Cassandra Husky, who volunteered to provide live tech support on the night of the toast using a platform that's only been in existence for 5 months. A bold move. Thank you so much, Ashley. Connie Shakalis, who agreed to reprise the role of the mop lady and did it so well, most of you thought it was the original mop lady. And Alam Barker, who put together the accompanying music and helped us out in a variety of technical details throughout the toast. Jean Dayton and Jody Hoagland, who arranged gorgeous and delicious charcuterie and dressed up in Rotary blue elegant finery to hand you your boxes. Brian Hain, who supported Joe Throckmorton for every detail of the video production. You can imagine scheduling the toasters in town. A busy doctor in Cincinnati, and even an author in remotest Maine. You can imagine convincing 75 Paul Harris Fellows to gather at IU Memorial Stadium in the midst of a pandemic. What you probably can't imagine is what happened to that drone video. Apparently, the disc was damaged in removing it from the drone. Joe sent it to California in a desperate attempt to recover the contents. At our final planning meeting on Monday, just 4 days before the toast, we learned about the problem. At noon on Tuesday, we confirmed that the content was lost, irretrievable. We met on Zoom that night and realized we had photos of the gathering, thanks very much to Jim Bright. By noon on Wednesday, we had selected and arranged the photos, found copyright-free music, recorded a voiceover, and sent all of those to a graphic designer that Brian Hain found on Fiverr. By Wednesday evening, just 24 hours later, we had a fully produced short video to insert. The cost, $75. The designer in Nigeria. Truly an example of Rotary's global reach. We were mortified by the loss of the data after so many of you came out, but what we heard was, you had fun, you enjoyed the fellowship, and isn't that just the icing on the Rotary cake? So thank you for your help with the planning. Thank you for coming out for the drone video. Thank you for sponsoring or purchasing a ticket. And if you did, you've received a YouTube link that you can watch again and again. We're still paying a few bills, waiting on some accounts receivable, so we don't have the exact amount yet, but we'll be presenting a big check to Hoosier Hills Food Bank on January 26th during the most hungry month at the food bank here at our club meeting. So I hope you'll be able to make it on the 26th and help us celebrate that final step in the 2020 toast. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you so much. And now we have a special treat. We get to reprise the Mop Lady video. Get to see it once again. It's much better to view it when you're at home, when you can have all the great audio quality, but that is so fun, Connie. Thank you for doing that. Okay, we have another announcement here. We are moving to a new Zoom link. So make sure to check your email before next week's meeting. You'll be receiving the link in an email from Jim Bright. It'll also be in the roundabout, but we're moving to a new Zoom link and nothing else will change. You'll still have the same experience when you come here. We'll still have breakout rooms, but don't go back to an old email to access the Zoom link for us. We moved to a new account, so please look out for that. And we will have someone hanging out in this room in case you go to the wrong place. We'll redirect you to the right place next week. So make sure that you check your email and get the most current link. Now we have an announcement from Hank Heichema. Hank?
Thank you, Ashley. This morning I sent condolences to Mr. Guitar from the Rotary Club Gombe. Let me give you some background. Many of you will remember that since 2013, we have had a relationship with a Rotary Club in Kinshasa, the Rotary Club Gombe, with which we carried out an international project called Education Matters. One of the leading people in Rotary Club Gombe was an engineer called Mr. Guitar. He was the one who oversaw renovations at the school that we were supporting, during several years. We installed a water system, we renovated classrooms, we created a community garden, etc. Currently, we're working with the Rotary Club Gombe to publish a French edition of the book of Elsa Marston, our former late Rotarian of the Bloomington Rotary Club, who wrote this book about a fictitious boy in the Congo who fled the rebels, and she compared that to the walk of a Bloomington boy who walked the Appalachian Trail. Anyhow, Mr. Guitar had a sad loss. A little over a week ago, his wife passed away, and I took the liberty after talking to Ashley and sending on behalf of the Rotarians of the Bloomington Rotary Club condolences to Mr. Guitar. We still have this relationship with Rotary Club Gombe, and we still hope to do good work in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Hank. We have a few volunteering opportunities to highlight before we move to the main event. The Boys and Girls Club is doing a radiothon this Friday. We could use a few volunteers from 4 to 6. If you want to hop on the phone when people call into the radio station, let me know. And Steve Moberly has an announcement about the Salvation Army bell ringing. Steve? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
There.
There, we got it. Great.
I'm sorry. This is my wife's computer. Our Rotary Club has had a long tradition of ringing the bells for the Bloomington Salvation Army every winter to raise funds to help needy children in our community, and there are many this year especially, to receive some warm clothing and some toys at Christmas. The need is really great because there are so many parents who are unemployed and laid off due to the pandemic. President Ashley, who also chairs our Community Service Committee, has authorized our participation in this endeavor again this year, and I'm pleased to help. And Glenda Murray has set up the sign up on Sign Up Genius as she has done the last several years, and I thank Glenda for her help. We will ring on 4 Saturdays, starting Saturday, November 28th, and concluding on Saturday, December 19th. There will be 4 one-hour shifts, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., 11 a.m. to 12 noon, 12 noon to 1 p.m., and 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. 2 Rotarians per shift. We will be inside the cart lobby, high and dry, 3 Saturdays at Kroger East and 1 Saturday at Kroger South. Natalie recently sent out the link for people to sign up on Sign Up Genius, and thanks to the following Rotarians who have already joined me and signed up. Owen Johnson, our first sign up, Jim Bright, Art Omick, Tina Swanson, Joe King, Sarah Laughlin, 2 shifts, bless her. Steve Engel, Jerry Pajic and Marietti, and Jeff Baldwin, 2 shifts. We need more ringers. The shifts on November 28th and December 5th are almost filled up, but we need more ringers on December 12th and December 19th. The link will be in this week's roundabout. Please sign up or just email or call me and I will sign you up. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It's always a lot of fun, so be sure to sign up and offer your time this holiday season. We have one more opportunity that we really need volunteers to fill backpacks for our United Way Day of Literacy district grant. So December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, we're assembling backpacks. We only have 5 volunteers signed up so far, so we need lots more of you to fill in the gaps. We have only 4 at a time, and you'll be distanced, and it's very safe and very clean and monitored. So consider signing up. We need a lot of help, and it's going to do a lot of good for children in our community. So that link will also be in this week's roundabout, and you can contact Natalie or myself, and we can sign you up as well. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce Charlotte Zitlow to introduce our speaker for today.
Am I speaking?
Yes, Charlotte.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm very glad today to introduce Moya Andrews, who all of you know focuses on flowers very frequently on WFIU. Moya is a woman who came here in 1967 from Australia and never went back. And she came to Santa Barbara to get her master's degree in speech and pathology, and met Jim Andrews, who she married, and they ended up going. He got a job at Columbia, so she went to Columbia and got her doctor's degree. She takes advantage of opportunities, obviously. So she got a doctor's degree in speech pathology, and then they moved. He got a job here at IU, and she followed. Like so many women that I know, including myself, she had this story. There were no jobs. She was just, she was a mere housewife. And she started doing some volunteer work, working with kids who had been taken out of the regular school system, who had speech and hearing issues. And she started teaching them at IU, on the IU campus, and was so successful at that it was noticed that she ended up getting a job on the faculty position at IU in the speech and hearing department. And on the way there, however, she had one very, very momentous experience, which was teaching working with Michael Shermas. And I don't know the details of that. He can reveal them as he sees fit. But anyway, she doesn't deny it, and he doesn't deny it, so it had to be good. And then in the 70s as well, I ran for Congress, and somebody said to me, or Moya called me and said, I could offer you some help in giving a speech. She could do that today too, as a matter of fact. But she volunteered to be my coach when I ran for Congress. She said I talked too much like a cookie salesman. And she made me raise my head and not look so, I guess, cookie lady-ish. So she's really good, and she meets people where they are. So she taught in the speech department, but she was not very happy in her job. So she would go home and do work out of her home, so she could get away from her office. And when she was home, she thought, well, I might as well start a garden. And she did. And so now she's our garden lady, the lady with a wonderful voice from Australia, and who knows how to speak, and also how to focus on flowers. Moya Andrews.
Thank you, Charlotte. There were a few exaggerations in that talk, but I appreciate it very much as an introduction. When I was thinking about what to talk about today, I realized November is not a good month for flowers in the United States, or certainly in Indiana. So I thought I'd talk more about the commercial aspects of the flower trade. And I found out some things that I didn't know that are kind of interesting. One is that this plant in front of us, the Phalaenopsis, which is an orchid, and its common name is called moth orchid because of the shape of the flowers. It's the most frequently purchased flowering potted plant in the world. And I saw some the other day at Fresh Time, and I always see them when I go to Kroger's, and they're $9.99, which makes them extremely affordable. So if you're looking for Christmas gifts, you can't go wrong with a moth orchid. And change the slide. And I thought I'd start the talk by talking about some other interesting facts about flowers before I get to the commercial part. This plant, the winter aconite, is the very first plant that flowers in my garden in Indiana, and it's poisonous. Now, the good thing about the fact that it's poisonous is that it blooms in February when there aren't likely to be any children running around in your yard anyway. But the winter aconite has a very interesting story about it, which I thought you might enjoy. I learned this story from John Pless, who used to be a pathologist here in Indiana and for the state.
Yeah, for,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And there was a man in Columbus, Indiana. He was a physician. And one day in the hospital cafeteria, he dropped dead. And everyone rushed over to help, thinking that he had perhaps had a heart attack since it was so sudden. But some clever person thought to save the tray. And when they could not find the cause of death, it wasn't caused from a heart problem, John Pless looked for some substance that may have poisoned him. And they looked for a very long time because it was such an unusual poison. And it turned out that someone had chopped up the green leaves of this innocent looking little plant and put them into his salad. Now, John never told me who did it or what the rest of the story was, but I have never forgotten the story. And every time I look at this little plant in February, I think about how it caused the untimely death of someone right here in Indiana. Change your slide. Another interesting plant that has an interesting story is the vitex or chaste tree. I have one in my yard, and it's not really a tree. It's like a big shrub. It grows about 5 feet, and it has very pretty flowers and very nice foliage, and it's deer resistant, very adaptable in our gardens. You see, Indiana gardens have huge challenges. We have extremely hot summers and extremely cold winters sometimes, not as much as we used to, but we do have still very cold temperatures in the winter. And so any plant that does well in our garden has to be very versatile. And we also have that very hard clay soil, which has the advantage of keeping moisture down deep in the soil so that something with a really deep root can access the moisture even in very dry weather. But most of the time, things with short roots suffer if they're not watered constantly during our very hot, dry summers. But anyway, this is a plant that copes with all of that and has no significant pests. The deer don't like it because there's a kind of astringent smell to the leaves, not unpleasant, but something that turns deer off. And the part that always amuses me is that medieval monks chewed the leaves of this vitex plant, thus the name chaste tree, to quell their sexual urges. It wasn't an aphrodisiac. It was something that they hoped would quell their sexual urges. So that plant always amuses me when I see it in my yard, but I also love it because it becomes a nice cut flower when it blooms late in the summer, and it dies to the ground in the winter, but it always comes back. Change side. Today, I'm going to talk more about the industry that supports the cut flower trade. It's a $50 billion per year industry. And it came to pass because of a chance happening. A man called David Cheever in 1967 was enrolled in a botany class at Colorado State University. And he wrote a term paper on how you could make a successful cut flower trade. And his research showed him that countries near to the equator are very good climates especially the countries where there are high altitudes. And if you grow flowers there, you can grow flowers 24 hours a day, year round. And so it doubles the amount of things you can produce or items you can produce. And 2 years later, this David Cheever got together with a couple of his friends, and they all put in enough money to make $100,000, and they built the first greenhouses in Colombia. And that was the beginning of this multi-billion-dollar industry. They produce many more plants and flowers, of course, because of being able to do it year round. And now the states in the United States, such as California, Washington, and Oregon, which used to produce most of the cut flowers for the American trade, only produce at the very most about 20% of our cut flowers. The rest of our cut flowers are imported from South America. And the flowers, the cut flowers that come in are duty-free. In early 1900s, the government was really worried about the opium imports into the United States. And they thought that if they could introduce more cut flowers and have people produce more flowers instead of opium, that they might be able to reduce the amount of opium that was coming into the United States. Alas, it didn't work, because the opium trade continues to this day. But the countries, Colombia, which produces the most flowers for the United States, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, are able to export their flowers without any duty. The fact that the flowers can be harvested year round is absolutely crucial to the success of the industry. The other very important fact is that aeronautics increased tremendously during the 20th century. We got bigger planes, we got faster planes. And so now it's 3 hours from South America to the Miami airport, which is the biggest port of entry for the cut flower trade. The climate around the equator at countries where there is high altitude means that the climate is not too hot, but there is plenty light and good climate 24 hours a day. And it's made it possible also to use cheap labor, so that although much has been done to improve the conditions of the people that are working in the industry in these countries, the cost of labor there is significantly less still, even though nowadays they're given more benefits than they used to be given, much cheaper than if people were being paid in California, Washington, or Oregon. So that the cut flower trade is a huge part of our economy. And most of that comes from South America. Next slide. %80 of our cut flowers come to the US from South America. And most European cut flowers come from Africa. Most tulips, however, come still from Holland. And Holland still produces a lot of flowers for the continent. But I had not known until I read this recently when I was getting ready for this talk, how much of the cut flower industry that supports Britain originates in Africa. Climate, altitude, and labor dictate the shift from plants grown locally to importing from vast distances away. It seems incredible to think that the flowers that we buy in Kroger's have been in transit 4 to 5 days before we actually see them in the store. Mother's Day is the biggest day for growing flowers, for selling flowers. Mother's Day, more people get flowers because you usually have a mother, a grandmother, maybe an aunt or two that you give flowers to. Valentine's Day is a smaller, though also huge day for selling flowers. But usually it's roses for Valentine's Day and usually they're for a wife or a husband or a sweetheart. And rarely do those sales exceed those sales on Mother's Day. Easter is another big day, but that's mainly Easter lilies. And many of the Easter lilies are grown in California. The best buy in terms of longevity, if you're buying flowers, is to buy mums, carnations, and astromerias. They last the longest time in water. Next slide. Now, when you think about how they have developed the flowers and established certain traits, you have to think about the bioengineering aspect of gardening. First of all, a definition of a cultivar. A cultivar is a cultivated variety of any plant, actually, not only a flowering plant, but any plant that has been tinkered with by humans. During the 20th century, there were huge advances made in manipulating flower traits. And I was surprised to learn that petunias are the lab rats for flower research. I hadn't thought about that, but petunias are excellent plants for us to grow as annuals in our garden. And petunias are a very good example of patenting. I always think about them when I think about how flowers are patented. It wasn't until the late 1900s that the United States allowed flower growers and plant producers to patent the new varieties that they were able to engineer. And wave petunias, which many of you will be familiar with, wave petunias were one of the very first plants to be patented, and their patent now has run out. Nowadays, patents are usually 20 years long, and after 20 years, the person that engineered the variety no longer gets any money from sales. So that wave petunias are no longer patented, but they're still excellent. And the thing that is unusual about the wave petunia is that they're the first petunia that plant scientists were able to produce that do not need to be deadheaded. You know, most times in the olden days, when you grew older varieties of petunias, you had to pick off the flower that had died in order for the plant to get the signal that they were to produce new flowers. But once they developed the wave petunia, it was possible for us not to have to deadhead them in order for them to keep blooming. And that's why wave petunias are very, very special. And we all bought wave petunias for years, but now their patent has lapsed. And a lot more new varieties of petunias are the ones that we see and often buy in the greenhouses in the spring. Now, I'd like to say, I think we're probably better off continuing to buy wave petunias because they're cheaper, because their patent has already lapsed. But also, they're tried and true. And because they are such good plants in terms of their traits, they are used as the plants very often when people are trying to develop new traits in other types of flowers. They will try it out first on the wave petunia. Now, one thing that's very important is ethylene gaseous hormone. It's a hormone, but it's called ethanol. And it's the substance that has to be reduced in order to create a longer lasting cut flower. And other traits are affected also by this particular hormone. Shelf life is most important, of course, if you're going to be transporting flowers a long distance. In the 20th century, an ethyl block was introduced, which made it possible for flowers to be bred that controlled for the level of ethylene, which made it possible then for flowers to be shipped long distances because their shelf life could be increased. It can also be controlled using temperatures below 35 degrees, so that if you've got plants in a cold refrigerated state, they're going to last longer because their ethylene levels will be less. And that, again, is an important characteristic that we need to think about when we think about the fact that by lowering the amount of ethylene in the flowers, the plant engineers have also made it possible for the flowers to be kept at low temperatures when they're transported from countries like South America to the United States. When they're first picked, they're put into water, but pretty much soon after that, the flowers are all refrigerated. And that's what makes it possible for them to last 4 or 5 days before we buy them at Kroger's. Scent, however, is a characteristic that's been sacrificed in the cultivation and development of other traits that we think are important for the cut flowers. Researchers also manipulate exposure to light and the amount of chilling temperatures. And this also relates to the fact that in South America, in the Andes in particular, where you get high altitudes, you get cooler days. So the greenhouses don't need to use so much air conditioning. They can open the greenhouses at night and even during the day in the countries where there are high altitudes and keep the flowers cool and at a comfortable temperature pretty much year round. Next slide. It's not at all pretty to see the way they grow the cut flowers. I remember when I was in California seeing fields and fields of cut flowers at Lompoc, for instance. They would have fields of them and they were so pretty growing all outdoors. They don't grow outdoors in South America. They grow in these hastily constructed, fairly cheap greenhouses. But they do have bug screens on all the vents, which prevents the problem of bugs making holes in your flowers. And the water and the nutrients is very economically distributed via drip lines to each plant. And so you don't waste a lot of water and you can control the exact amount of fertilizer that each plant gets. The temperature is controlled mainly by fans, heaters, hot pipes, and air conditioners, but less air conditioning is needed there because of the altitude. And that makes it a lot easier and a lot more economical to produce these flowers. Now you'll see on the map where Colombia is. It's very close to the equator, and Ecuador too, and Peru and Bolivia. All of those countries produce large numbers of cut flowers for the United States. Next slide. When they're harvested by women mainly, women and children, maybe fewer children than there used to be in the early days of the industry, but they're cut individually. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but there are big vats of pesticides. And as soon as the flower is cut, preferably with a long stem, if it's a rose, the women that are cutting the flowers have these special metal gloves, and they push their hand up and down the long stem of the rose, and that gets rid of all the thorns and any leaves. However, if there's any blemish at all in the flower, they're thrown onto a heap. They don't ship any flowers that are not perfect, which is what's made us think that all flowers are perfect nowadays. When you grow them in your garden, you know that they're never all perfect. But when you buy them in a store, they are pretty much perfect. And this is particularly so of roses. A lot of work is done hybridizing roses. There are all different colors. There are bicolors, there are tricolors, but very few have any scent anymore. But from the beginning, as the women go up and down the rows of the greenhouses, they put them into buckets of water. But then at the end of their row, they are packed into boxes, cardboard boxes, and some are laying with their head at the end. Well, they're all laid, and some are laying with their head at the end, this end, and the stems overlap in the middle. and then tissue paper is put on them, and the box is closed, and they're kept in the dark in coolers until the refrigerated trucks arrive. And the refrigerated trucks take them to the airport, and they're put in the cold baggage holds of the planes. And some of the planes have no passengers, they're just all flowers. Others have some passengers and the flowers go in the holds, but there's no water since they have left the greenhouse. When they were first cut, they were put briefly into a bucket of water, but after that, there's no water. It's all refrigeration. 4 to 5 days after cutting, they reach their destination. Now, these cut flowers mainly go through Miami, but there are other ports of entry. For example, New York and Boston, and sometimes Denver, sometimes Dallas, but the majority of them go through Miami. And Miami's a very hot place, so that they have to be very careful that they don't stand on the runway for very long at the time that they're unloaded. They're inspected by inspectors from Homeland Security, and they also inspect food and other things that are imported. But the interesting thing is that if there are any insects or any mold, even the tiniest piece of mold, the whole shipment is destroyed, because the United States does not want any mold from South America or any bugs from South America. But ironically, unlike food inspection, flowers are never tested for pesticides. And yet the flowers have been doused, submerged in these vats of very toxic pesticides at the time they were picked. Now, the moral of this story is, when you are buying flowers, or when you buy flowers to give to someone on Valentine's Day, remind them not to smell them, because all you're doing is burying your nose in a flower that is full of pesticides, because the scent has been bred out of every one of those roses. Next slide. A few tips for buying. Imported flowers obviously have been in transit. So if you really want flowers that are going to last as long as possible, choose refrigerated flowers. They do have refrigerated parts of the flower shop at Kroger's, and most florists, private florists, have a lot of refrigeration. You recut the stems before arranging. Usually it's a good idea to hold the stem underwater and recut it before you put it in your vase. Ensure there's no greenery underwater, because that will rot. And we know from marigolds from our own garden, the smell of rotting foliage that's been in water for a few days is not pleasant. If the flowers droop, totally immerse them in a cold water bath. Lie them in the bath and in cold water, and you'll get at the most 2 more days. Now, this is good to know if you're getting ready for a wedding or something and the flowers look droopy, but it's not going to buy you much time for flowers you buy every day from the grocery store. There are a few references at the bottom. Gillian Harris and I have written a couple of books about flowers on perennials and shrubs in this area. And Amy Stewart wrote a book about the cut flower industry, which I drew on for information for this talk. Next slide. I think that's the last slide. Yes, it is the last slide. So, questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Oh, Moya, that was fabulous. I loved every second of it. My question is that I noticed when I lived in New York that in the winter, in the dead of winter, wait a minute, was it pansies? I guess it's pansies were growing every year. How can that be?
Well, the plants, actually, a lot of those pansies come from California. Most of the plants that we buy now are grown in the United States. It's just the cut flowers that come from South America mainly. But seasonal things like pansies, which are always a sign of spring, are grown by the growers in California, and the plants are shipped all over the United States. And they're programmed according to when the plant was started and the temperature that it's been exposed and the light that's been exposed to, they know exactly how much light and how many days it needs before the flowers will set buds. And so they ship them when the buds are set. And by the time you buy them in the warmth of a store, they have come out of the cold refrigerated areas that they were kept in, and they're in a warm florist shop or grocery store, and they're just ready for the buds to open. And so they do. It's a science. The timing of when the buds are set, when the buds will open, the temperatures that they're exposed to dictate a lot of the sequence.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Thank you, Moya. This is Martha Wales. And I don't have a picture, which is good.
No, I'm looking for you and I can't find you.
Yeah. Is there a way to tell when you go into a flower store, which are the roses? Let's say we're coming up to Valentine's Day. Which are the roses that are older than the other roses? I mean, so some of them are 4 to 5 days, some of them maybe 8 to 9.
That's right, exactly. You may be buying them right at the end of their life. Well, there's one thing you can do. I always ask in Kroger's, when did this shipment come in?
Oh.
Or when do you expect roses to come in next? For example, if I'm doing an arrangement for the garden walk, I order them ahead of time and I say, what day do your flowers come in? Because that tells me that they're going to be as fresh as I can possibly get them in that particular store. So ask when their flower shipments come, and also look at how much the rose is opened. They're picked in the bud, so they're just starting to open. And so the more open the flower is, the older it is in the case of roses. And that's pretty much all you can do, Martha, I think.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. This is Leslie Green. I have a comment too, that when I was first starting gardening, maybe, I don't know, 15 years or more ago, I drove to your house and you were in your yard and you showed me all around and told me about all the flowers, and it was such an inspiration. I still drive by your house every year just to see, and I don't live in Bloomington. I make a point to come by your house. My question is, what about the florists? Are they in danger or at risk if they're dealing with these flowers that have so much pesticides on them, or is there protection they take?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, Leslie. I would think that they probably have to wash their hands after they've dealt with these things, but I don't know whether there's anything in the Florist Association that warns them about untoward risks. But it's a good question. It's a very good question.
Moya, Judy
Yes.
Schroeder here. Can you tell us how to make poinsettias last the longest? We're coming up on poinsettia time.
Well, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, they're grown a long way away. And again, I'd ask when the shipment came in. And usually they're programmed so that they last at least through Christmas. You know, the way they breed them, they know they've got, it's a commodity that has to last through Christmas. And then I think it's just luck whether you get one that drops its leaves quickly after Christmas or the flowers droop later. But I think the poinsettias are much more durable than things like roses. They have, since those what look like red petals are really their leaves, leaves don't drop as quickly as petals do. So I think you get a lot more for your money out of poinsettias because the actual flower are those little knobbly things in the middle of the red, what we think of as petals. So you're talking about how soon it's going to drop its red leaves. And so I think you're safe with the poinsettia, that you're going to get your money's worth out of it in terms of length of time.
And then do you just throw it out?
I throw mine out. I used to throw them out. I used to try to keep them, but it's a question of the light. You know, when we don't have a controlled situation like in a greenhouse where they can adjust the length of light. Poinsettias grew in my mother's garden in Australia, which was in the north of Australia, so it was in the tropics. And they were tall, rangy things. They were plants this high, and they had very small and not very showy petals. And so when I saw the poinsettias that had been engineered by the plant scientists in this country, I was just overwhelmed at how big the flowers were and how long they lasted and how showy they were and all the different colors, the pinks and the whites, they've all been bred because there are no pink or white ones that grow wild. And so that's a plant that has been biogenetically engineered a great deal. And I think longevity has been bred into it very well. So I think you are going to get your money's worth if you buy either a Phalaenopsis orchid or a red poinsettia. I think both of those plants are pretty good in terms of the length of time they'll give you for your money.
Thank you so much, Moya. Will you be able to stay after for a few more minutes for a few more questions?
I will, and thank you, Ashley. I've enjoyed this opportunity to talk to this group. Many faces I recognize.
Wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
thank you, Michael, for all your help.
In honor of your presentation today, we'll be giving a donation to Amethyst House. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Sally, would you tell us about next week's program, please?
Yes, next week we get to hear from Betsy Steerett, who's a brilliant artist. She's a painter and the longtime director of the Grunwald Gallery of Art at IU. Her talk is called Natural Histories, so don't miss it.
Thank you so much. Michael, share the four-way test graphic so we can say that together and close our meeting today. Of the things we think, say, and do. First,
Is it the truth?
second,
Second,
fair
Is
to
it
fair.
fair?
All concerned.
Third, will it build goodwill?
Goodwill and better friendship?
Fourth,
Fourth, will it be
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And fifth, is it fun?
fun.
Yes, indeed.
The 18th looks good because there's nothing after it. However,